Kill Complacency, a podcast that inspires growth and intentionality and helps you overcome your greatest obstacles.
My guest today is Nick Jonsson. He's a #1 bestseller of Executive Loneliness. He's a speaker, coach. He's a triathlon. He does Ironman for fun. He's actually a few weeks out from doing a big one. I always ask this question of podcast people we interview, what's something you do intentional? And I've got to read his reply today. He said, after hitting rock bottom, I realized that the intentional life doesn't happen by accident. Today, I don't chase success first. I protect the habits that make success sustainable. I prioritize my health. I make time for people I love. I look for opportunities to serve others. If I get those things right, everything else tends to fall into place. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Marty. It's great to be here.
First of all, I just want to applaud you for saying, well done on admitting hitting rock bottom. A lot of us won't admit that. So take us to that, Nick. Talk to us about what that was like and how you rebuilt your life. And you're the limitless guy now. So how do you go from rock bottom to that?
Well, I think there's two paths to rock bottom here. First is to admit it to ourselves, right? Work on ourselves. That's one part. Secondly, to share it with others and even to share it with another person, let alone to share it with the world as we are doing here today. There's a couple of steps there and they didn't happen instantly. Let's put it that way. It was also a long slider going down when I was grinding down before I hard hit that rock bottom. It wasn't just overnight, right? So it's a steady long fall and then it's a climb back up. So it's been a hell of a journey, but I'm so grateful for that it happened. I'm grateful that I survived it. And I'm even more grateful to be talking to you about it today, Marty.
How many years ago was that?
So my slide started to happen around 11 years ago, and I was going down for about 3 years. And it was in 2018 when I hit my rock bottom.
I had a son who was on a slide. He's 20 now. And it's really hard as a parent watching your kid on the slide, but we knew it was the best thing for him. And our prayer was that it would happen fast because ideally when we hit the bottom, right, then we can bounce back. Talk to the listeners a little bit, Nick, about bouncing back. When you hit the bottom and you made change, what changed and talk a lot about habits. So take us back to that rebuilding.
Yes. So what was it that really got me out of that dark black hole that I was in, And then at that moment, basically, I had not spoken about my feelings and emotions. I had resigned from my dream job. I was jumping from job to job, making bad investments, joining failing startups, and I was challenged by my ex-wife at the time, and I couldn't deal with that, so I pushed her away as well, filed for divorce, isolating myself more and more, and that is how I went down. The turning point only came when I met someone who I felt I could trust, and I opened up and I asked for help. That was really the beginning of my turning point, and it is like they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I would say that's what happened to me. So if we're imagining 3 years, bottling up, keeping everything internally, and getting more and more sick, more and more staying in my own head. There's so much shit in there eventually that you just need to get out. And even at the lowest point, my left foot swallowed up like an elephant foot. It was later diagnosed by psychiatrists as psychosomatic illness. There's a mental health illness when we are not letting out. And so that's basically where I was, and the turning point came right there by starting to speak about it.
Wow. I haven't read your book, but is that the premise of your book? Is that we've got to be open and speak about it?
The loneliness and the isolation, as I'm talking about in the executive loneliness, that is really that. And especially as male, tend to not be so open. Maybe we have good friends, but what do we do then? Maybe we go and play sport, we watch some TV, we have a couple of beers together, we have a great time together, and that's great. Friends are too scared to be vulnerable. We're too scared to open up, and maybe we don't want to bother them with our problems. They have theirs. That kind of mindset, that was certainly my case. So I left my office, perhaps there was things that I had on my mind, but rather than sharing it, I just tried to forget about it. Of course, the next morning, the problems were still there with a hangover on top of it. So that didn't solve anything.
You said you met somebody. Was that a male, a female?
The person I met at the time is today my second wife, and we married for 8 years. I had met her, we were dating at the time, and we started to talk about getting married, and that's when I thought she deserved to know that I'm not feeling well, and I shared what was happening inside me. She was very shocked and surprised because she didn't have any clue or idea that I was going through a tough time. Yes, she could see that I gained some weight, but she didn't think too much about it. So it just shows that, we are so good at, as actors, to hold it together, keep it together, and showing to the world that everything is great, that even someone who I'm very close to getting married couldn't even notice. That was the saving point. And when she heard me sharing my challenges, she naturally wanted to help. So she dragged me to a doctor immediately, shared my story with the doctor, which meant I was exposed twice. And then after that, she dragged me to a common friend of ours who had gone through something similar before and shared my story there. So suddenly I had 3 different people helping me, supporting me, and everyone just acted like normal. I thought I was the only person in the whole world who going through this challenging stuff. But as soon as this was normalized, the stigma was reduced. And our friend also introduced me to a recovery community. So suddenly I was also in a room with others who had gone through some similar challenges. And again, I wasn't judged. And with that, I started to feel normal. And from there, I started my recovery journey.
Can you talk to the listener, Nick, that is in this spiral and is feeling stuck, and just take yourself back to there? What's that person need to do? Who do they need to look for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was too scared to open up to anyone. I thought they would judge me, they wouldn't understand. And that was where I got it wrong. And to anyone who's listening, no matter what you're going through, most likely you are not the first and the only human being in the whole universe who ever gone through this. In my case, it was alcohol. For someone else, your problem might be drugs. It might be gambling, gaming, porn addiction, or whatever vices it is. So maybe it's spending too much time on social media, binge watching Netflix, so you don't have the time to read books or study for whatever degree you're trying to complete. As soon as we have the awareness of that and the honesty to tell ourselves this is actually becoming a problem, that's when we can then ask, okay, what community, which person can I trust to speak with and have an honest conversation about that? And that would be my recommendation, because that's as soon as I start to have those conversations, that's when things turn around. And that's what I found is the case for everybody. It is, as long as we keep it secret, nothing will happen.
Yeah, and that's the rock bottom, right? It's the point where we get to the lowest point. The pain becomes big enough that we say, I'm not doing this. I need help. Otherwise, it's just a bottomless pit, right?
Yeah, and here comes the question, right, Marty? Do we need to keep going? I mean, the lift might always have one more floor in the basement. So how deep do you want to go? Or is it okay to turn at the ground floor, for example, and call that the rock bottom? Or should we keep going until we have no finances, until we are divorced, until we lost a job, until we have ruined ourselves and are hospitalized? I mean, how low do we want to go before we say, this is my rock bottom, let's turn it around now?
I'm happy you're talking about this, because podcast is kill complacency, and we can be complacent about it, right? We can just keep going subfloor, 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 and never be honest with ourselves. Always let our imagination make it worse than it is, and never find that friend that we can trust. So yeah, I love it that you're bringing this up.
The important thing is that we shouldn't have to wait for our bad times. Like in my case, this
for
is
sure.
not only the bad times. It's about building trust, building relationships, and being vulnerable in the good times, so that we are ready for the bad times, because these times will happen to all of us. All of us will face grief. We will lose someone who's close to us, and we will lose jobs, especially in today's times, and there will be adversity. So let's not get so surprised with it, but rather be expecting it and be ready for it.
Powerful. What are some specific habits? I know there's habits you do now, but were there habits that you started, that you put into place then, that helped you climb out of it?
Yeah, there was the habits of, learning to be vulnerable, learning to trust again. And in my case, then you could say, almost looking back at it, I said it sometimes. I said, I'm fortunate that I had a drinking problem, because there exists so many people with a drinking problem out in the world. I couldn't even lie to myself and say I'm the only one who ever had problems with alcohol. So that meant that anywhere I went in the world, there would be a recovery community. And I dig into that. I can do that all around the world now. And there's also meetings online, all around the world online, every hour, most often even every half an hour. So I can dial into these. So even physical locations I go all around the world, there will be recovery meetings for that. So I will find my tribe. I will find a place where I feel safe, where I don't feel judged. There will be someone else. And the same is these days true for most of these bad habits that easily can turn into addictions when we're going through adversity. Let's dig into these report communities and having some honest and deep conversations where we can meet like-minded and people who've been there before who can help us. And that's what I'm speaking and advocating for these days.
When you work with people that are struggling with addictions, I mean, you mentioned alcohol. Is that the most talked about one? Which one do we need to work on uncovering more and making more? Yeah, I guess I'm going to say normalizing it.
There's a lot of challenges out there in the world today. For the younger generation, it's not so much alcohol. It's even more so perhaps mobile phone per se, not just social media, but mobile phone
Sure.
addiction. And being too connected online and disconnected in person. I know a lot of youngsters who are very uncomfortable in having a job interview in person. Maybe they will ace it for 6 interviews online, but suddenly they come in person and they just freeze, you know? I know many people who keep failing those interviews because they're just too uncomfortable being in person. And then, we have to remember that we are social human beings. So if someone is listening or someone is going through a tough time by social connections, then it is about having a plan for making sure that we like-minded and we have these honest conversations and introducing ourselves in tribes, in communities, linking with hobbies and so on where we like. And we have to discipline ourselves to show up for these meetings, to actually realize that, yes, I need physical health in my life. My mental health is important, but I need social health as well. And we've got to perhaps discipline ourselves, spend some time working on that as well.
That's so powerful. My wife and I recently read a book called The Anxious Generation. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I have heard about it, and I read it a year or 2 years ago.
Yes, but it talks all about that, like how the kids were being raised now are more anxious than ever because they've been given a screen and that's their interaction. And we've talked a lot about it. I see it because I host a real estate meetup. I feel like I see it with the big thing we're trying to offer people is networking. Like I can bring in a speaker and we can talk, but information has gotten so cheap that I really just want people to get the value from networking, from what you talked about, face-to-face interaction, because we can't get that. It's not the same. And I feel like we're losing it. It's hard.
I'm fully aligned with you and I agree. And there's a time and place for online connections. I give you an example here. So I run a men's community. And yes, we have a men's community, WhatsApp community. And inside there, we have WhatsApp groups. We have a general chat line where people can share books, materials that they can recommend with others. There's also a place where people there can ask for help. If they're challenged with something,
Yes.
just dump it there, someone who can perhaps help them. We also have a daily gratitude group there where we are encouraged to check in every morning and just mention something we are grateful for. And that's a natural check-in. Of course, in addition to this also, we meet in person when we can. We also have a Zoom meeting once a month online with a different theme every time. So we do also have the physical meetings, we are speaking together, and therefore it feels like a complete circle. I think it is, if all interactions are only online, we don't have that physical interactions, we don't speak to each other, that's when I believe that it's moving the wrong direction. And that's where I think people become anxious. Yeah, the anxious generation is real.
And my concern is really for my kids, because I feel like mine and your generation, we lived the first half of our life without screens. And so we know what real life looks like. But the 15 to 20-year-old out there, like they don't know any better. They don't know what life is like without having a screen constantly in front of you. So that's my concern, is we're having a big cultural shift. And I want to try to combat that with, real life networking and interactions and looking each other in the eye, and smelling each other.
Absolutely, Marty. You have a son who's 20, turning 21, you said, right? And I have a son who's 17 now. And it's about them being a bit creative, right? And coming up with activities which they love to do. Like my son like coming on bike rides for me. And it's very hard to be on your social media when you're cycling. The phone is in the back pocket, it's on mute, right? So you got to get out there. And we did it on Monday this week. We cycled for 1.5 hours, a good chat conversation, no devices. And then I asked him afterwards, what would be his favorite pit stop? What would he like to have? And we stopped and we had a hot dogs at the petrol station was his choice. We were sitting there at the petrol station chatting away, for half an hour. And then we had an ice cream on top of that, and we just had 2 hours, no devices. We didn't even think about it. So if we do something that the teenagers love, then even they forget about the devices. But also if you're out fishing, you're out doing kind of stuff, you're trekking and so on, the devices actually take the backseat. So we just have to be a bit creative. And then one more thing on this, I believe we also need to lead by example, because I can sometimes, find myself spending time on work emails and so on in front of him. And if I do that, then he's just going to copy me, right? So we have to look at ourselves as well.
Good. I appreciate you saying that, because that can be my struggle, is because work is on a phone now. It's easy to check the emails. That's good. Talk to me about your book, The Executive Loneliness. Is it it's all about these principles, but is it more specifically about the leader?
Yeah, so basically, I started to write the book in 2019. So I'm 1 year into my recovery, and something has happened here because at that time I lived in my own world with a recovery. A few people close to me knew that I was in recovery. My parents knew at the time, my closest friends, recovery community, but the world didn't know it. But I lost a friend of mine to suicide at that time. So in 2019, I lost a friend of mine to suicide. And it brought me right back to my rock bottom. And I was wondering then, how close was I to this? And then my next question was, what can I do to prevent this from ever happening again? And armed with all these questions and a lot of anger, sadness inside me, I called his relatives, I called his brother, and I started to investigate, looking on his social media, seeing posts that he just posted saying he'd never been happier, with the photos of him and his girlfriend. He had just been to Mount Everest, the base camp, and I followed him in this Facebook group for a month. Everything looked wonderful. Everything looked fantastic. And I met him just a week earlier because we were working on a project together. So that's when I realized, I just wish that I had some more deeper conversations with him, because when I met him a week before, it was all about business. It was about his career and everything else. There was no deeper conversations. And that's when I realized, yes, I'm now more vulnerable in my close circle. I should be more vulnerable openly. So with that, I called up a suicide hotline in Singapore. I signed up as a volunteer and a fundraiser, and I set up a fund for suicide prevention. And that was the first time then when I went public with my story. As I launched this new fund, I also made a video and I posted this on LinkedIn. And I went out for a run, came back to my computer, and this post had gone viral all around the world, and money kept pouring in. My inbox was loaded with 230 incoming messages, and people just said, "Thank you, Nick, for talking about this topic that so many people are avoiding." So with that also, I had an invitation to go on live TV, live radio, and a newspaper wrote a four pages feature asking me in detail about my story. So with that, my story was out there. And that went on for months. I spoke at so many business events, and that's basically a journey I'm still on today, still traveling the world, still talking to you today, Marty, about this. And with that, then people ask me, "Nick, you got to put this in a book." So that was the foundation and how the book then started. And not only my stories, but the stories of others and recovery stories in their rock bottom moment. And especially finding out what was the loneliness, what was the isolation they had. And I have a few people I interviewed in the book actually had suicidal thoughts. And I wanted to pinpoint where does loneliness tip over into suicidal thoughts and what is happening there. That was what I wanted really to look into.
Were you ever suicidal with your spiral?
I would say that I didn't have any suicidal thoughts, but I was, in the sense that I was drinking myself to death. Sometimes explain that as a slow, gradual suicide. There was times when I was thinking, I don't care if I wake up tomorrow. In fact, it'd be quite nice. I also had already signed up for life insurance, prepared my will, my testament, and I had sent that to my parents and my ex-wife. And I had created an email to my son, who was just 8-9 years old at the time, and sent him this information. So I was ready to leave.
You were
planet.
prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, I was fully prepared.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. I think specifically on this, suicide is often a result of loneliness, right? They'll feel bullied or not accepted or whatever. And so they feel like it's better to end their life. But I do think this isn't talked about enough. For whatever reason, we're not only have those suicidal thoughts, then we're ashamed of them. Could you talk to the listener maybe briefly that is maybe suicidal and what they need to do to realize that this is somewhat normal for them as well?
Yeah, it's again back to the question, having a conversation with someone we feel safe with, someone we can trust. And it can be a friend, it can be a colleague, it can be a family member, it can be a mentor, perhaps someone we worked with in the past who's more senior with us. And if it's none of those people, then there are therapists, psychologists, counselors. There's also all these free hotlines, and I come back to them again, because these days there are even 12-step recovery programs if you go in personal bankruptcy. There's even now recovery programs if you run your company in bankruptcy, because that's also when a lot of suicide comes in. If you're not vulnerable, if you're not open normally about your challenges, if you don't talk about your small challenges, imagine your company just go bankrupt, then it's not going to be in your nature to go home and tell someone. So what do? It's just overwhelming. So you might go down the path of ending your own life. That is what I found when I researched for the book. And the solution here is, again, if someone is listening today, even if your life is good, and I hope you don't have those suicidal thoughts, but think about in all interactions with the people you trust, take the relationship a little bit deeper, be a bit curious to ask them what's really happening in their life, listen carefully with empathy, paraphrase and reflect back, and then disclose something that is hard in your life, something that is challenging. So you just take the relationship to a deeper level. Because if we do this in the good times, when the tough times come, then we will express that more normally before it goes as deep and before suicidal thoughts even come in. Because I also interviewed many people here, and just by interviewing people, having conversations about this, I uncovered a few people who admitted to me that they right then on the spot were actually having had some suicidal thoughts just in the days to come. And the fact that I was there interviewing them, that was not part of the plan. And the pattern was therefore broken, and they were on recovery path. And I have a few of those stories inside my book, including a very successful woman who had actually rehearsed her own suicide twice. And now, being a psychologist and working on suicide prevention, I know when someone can explain very vividly the place, the time, the location where they actually make this happen, that means that this is really real. It's very close to happening. And that is why we hear many stories that people actually think of this at an actual location and the time. And when the rehearsal have happened, then wow, this is real. And we can break this pattern by having an honest conversation about it.
Yeah, in my book, I talk about when I was 16 or so, I was going to commit suicide. And it's exactly what you said. Place, location, everything. I was ready. I had the suicide letter in my note. I was going to hang myself. And as I leaned over a tree, I was in a tree fort. And as I was getting ready to, I honestly feel like I heard God stop me and say, I love you, Marty. Like it was loneliness I was craving. So, Marty, I love you. Like, don't do this. And I remember I started bawling because I felt loved. But to your point, like that was a secret I kept to myself for decades. And now that I've shared it, like it's amazing how many other people are like, thanks for sharing that. I had a girl stop me the other day. I remodel houses and she recognized my car and she said, hey, I saw your post. We talked. And she said, I've been struggling. Will you pray for me? So it's amazing. The openness and the importance of us, I guess, to talk about these things is literally save lives.
Yeah, absolutely, Marty. And thanks for sharing your story. That in itself can save lives. And by sharing our challenges that we've gone through, right? And the loneliness is there. And for anyone also who have an alcohol problem like me, there's huge loneliness and isolation in that. And if we don't break that pattern, if we don't speak about it, if we don't find other people who are in a similar space can understand us, then we're just going to isolate and withdraw more and more, which was my pattern for a few years until it was broken, until negative spiral was broken.
Talk to me about, I want to hear about your Ironman story. How did you start doing Ironman?
Yeah, so I had a couple of times in my life, when I woke up and I said I should do more fitness, more sport. Most of us have those times in our life. And I had a couple of those because, drinking was to excess and I was overeating, gaining weight, going to the doctor, and you get the result that the doctor tell you, right? You got to lose some weight, you got to look off the alcohol. And a couple of those times I would do something. I'd get a gym membership, lose some weight, and that happened. And it went on and off like this a few times over 4 or 5 years. And eventually then I realized, I'm a bit too heavy. It's too heavy on my knees. Running these races for running is too hard on the body. So then I thought, well, why don't I also add some cycling and some swimming? And I could hardly swim at the time, so I had to start with some lessons and so on. But from there was basically the start of it, and I quite enjoyed it. It was tough. It was tough because I did it by myself. I didn't have any coaches per se. And I was grinding it through, and I was even hospitalized at the finish line, carried out of a stretcher, cramping, and big drama. After then, my recovery, coming back and learning to ask for help, having coaches, having therapists, going in recovery, being vulnerable, being open, not doing it myself. I really, really excelled suddenly in the sport. I was before they ranked you in Ironman. I was top 17 in the world in my age group. And now after, I sort of hit every record I could, and I represented my country, Sweden, twice in the World Championship. I ranked top 2% in the world. And that's not working harder. That's just being more open and vulnerable and getting, working with others. So that's been my journey. And that's why I really love it, by having a growth mindset and just keep learning.
I want to shift gears a tiny bit because you're kind of convicting me. I'm training for a 100-mile race right now, and I reached out to a few coaches who are no longer coaching, and they said, no, And so I used Claude AI, and you can connect to your calendar, and I connect it to my Strava. And so I had it go in and look at my past stuff and then add a training plan to my calendar. And I can honestly say, Nick, like it does a beautiful job, especially like I asked for a weekly report. But I'm wondering, to your point, if I'm missing out on sharing stuff with a human because I have this AI. Like, talk to me about that. Like, do I need to find a real person?
I don't think we need to have a real person everything in our life. I have, for example, I track my sleeping. I have a sleep coach, for example, a AI sleep coach, and he does a pretty good job in coaching me to sleep. And, so it works. I think you could combine it. Like in your case, for example, if you're part of a running community, a running group where you discuss and you run together, then you're complementing it, right?
I do have that. Saturdays is my long run with my buddies.
Then why not? I think AI can do a great job. As long as we have some social health combining it, I think it's the best.
Yeah, that Saturday morning I look forward to it every week. I mean, you're sweating with 5 or 6 guys and, you're asking questions and you're learning hacks. Yeah, it's a highlight of my week every week. So yeah, I do have that shoulder to shoulder interaction with other guys. But to your point, like as AI becomes more prominent, like for me, I get so much more out of this weekly assessment from Claude. I mean, because you know how it is, it goes into the data so beautifully and reads it and then gives me more than a coach had as in the past. So
Yeah, absolutely. Let's use the tools for what they are. I also know some athletes, some very good athletes. I'm thinking about one as I'm speaking here, a male athlete who only used the AI tools. And he's very good, but he also does all the training by himself. And that means he doesn't get enough human interaction. You're training 20, 25 hours a week, all by yourself. All the feedback is by AI. And I know that when I speak to him also, he admits that he said, oh yeah, I'm training well, it's going well, but mentally I'm not so well. And then before you know it, you hear he's injured and he's sick and, and big anxiety around the races and everything and big drama. I think just remember that we are humans. We cannot replace that fully, at least not yet. Maybe science would one day invent a real robot by our side. I don't know.
No, and I mean, and I think I do good because like at night, my evening runs probably 2 nights a week. My younger boys, they ride their bikes and, I'm doing 6 or 8 miles and always chasing them. But yeah, I'm having that interaction and we're laughing together and sweating together and all that. So I definitely do have it. I agree with you about your buddy. For the high performer that's out there that senses something is off, can't quite name it, what's the first thing you would tell them?
Boy, high performer, when I hear that word, somehow I tend to go to thinking about maybe it's work because high performance is normally we're talking about work, right? And then we have that called work-life balance. And if we think about it, work-life balance, it almost implies that maybe 50% is work and 50% is life. And perhaps that's almost what it's like. But now as a coach, then, we work a lot with, it's called the wheel of life, right? Which is 8 parts of our life. And that is what I call then life balance. So it is then about looking at all the different areas, and the 8 areas then is business and career is just one of them. But then we have our finances, we have our health, we have a relationship with family and friends, we have our romance, so the marriage, we have a personal growth and contribution to society and spirituality, and then a bucket for fun and recreation and one for our physical environment. So when I talk about life balance, it's looking at all those areas, having some goals, meaningful short-term, medium and long-term goals in those areas, and really discussing that through and mapping that out. Then we're giving ourselves a fair chance to have life balance. But most of the time, otherwise, we work for a company and that company will have vision, mission, goals, KPIs, targets, bonus, everything is laid out. It just sucks us in. We put all our attention and focus there because that's how society works. But then all the rest gets on the side, and therefore we're falling short. And that is where I think we need to really look at ourselves. And that, though, I don't see that AI does a great job in that yet. It's very good to have a one-on-one person and speak with a coach. And that's the kind of job that I do now with my clients. And I see the people who are trying to do this by themselves with AI doesn't do such a good job.
Yeah, it's a yes man too often.
It tells you what you want to say.
It doesn't say, hey, you're an idiot, you're a moron. What are you doing? How has physical discipline shaped your mental and emotional health? How have you seen that shape you?
the alertness, right? The groundedness, and just to be able to sleep well. And I have a rest pulse of around 36 to 40 most of the time. So it takes a lot to stir me up, stress me up. I remember sitting on a flight recently, and the guy next to me by accident poured his mug of tea over me, spilled all over me. I was wet. He was so apologetic. I thought he was going to start crying. And I was just so calm, and I said, "Oh, no worries." And I generally didn't feel any anger, nothing. It was floating. If that was me a decade ago, I would be super tense, jump up, maybe even start arguing about it, So that's, I think, that is from physical health. But it is then exercising your body, but also doing something you love. And that for me means swimming, cycling, running. So at the moment, I'm at the peak of my Ironman training. It's 25, 28 hours a week. Most of that is out in the nature. So I'm really connecting with the birds, the wildlife, the nature for 20 hours a week at the moment. And that means I see a lot of deers, mooses, rabbits, and all kind of animal here being out in Europe, connecting with that and the sounds of that really grounds me.
Powerful. Do you listen to stuff as you do it, or do you just tend to just have no earbuds and enjoy nature?
I combine it, and I have the new Oakley Meta AI glasses, which are fantastic. So they voice controlled, which means I don't have to touch my phone during the run. So I typically start my exercise with complete silence, just connecting with everything for maybe half an hour, 1 hour into the ride or so on. And then I tell the AI to turn on the glasses, and the sound is fantastic. I also learned to connect it now to my WhatsApp, so I can send voice notes to myself without texted. So if I come up with ideas, brilliant ideas when I'm out.
You always do when you're moving, yeah.
Yeah, I do. And now I just then, I say, "Hey, Meta, send a voice note to Nick Jonsson myself." I just say it, and when I come back, then it's all there. So I don't have to stop. I don't have to worry. No good messages are passed, and that make me quite calm. And the best ideas are there. It's all in one, I cannot say that I'm completely without devices out there, but I don't have to stop. I don't have to take out my phone. It just feels very productive as well.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's cool. I've looked into those, but not that serious.
Oh, they're great. You should get them. Maybe get the Oakley to sponsor your show now.
Yeah, there we go. We can both get it for our podcast. What's next for Limitless?
I'm putting together at the moment a program, especially for men, also with someone else who is in recovery. So scaling up my men's group, which I spoke about. I had a men's group or a men's community for a while, but we're going to really make it a program where, we're going to commercialize it a bit and have weekly programs online. We will log on together and discuss through much of what we talked about today, just to have some heart-to-heart, vulnerable conversations, to make it a safe space. Because I think it's a need for people. Many people are isolated. Many people are perhaps working from home, entrepreneurs. I think the corporate world is sort of dying at the moment. There's more of entrepreneurs working from everywhere. And if we then are just spending time on our business, we don't have any real connections. And if we're not meeting in person with people, then second to best is at least belong to some kind of online community group where we can have some real conversations.
Really powerful. Okay, I got 4 more questions for you. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give him?
Well, the first one was don't be an idiot when it comes to smoking. I smoked cigarettes, I think, from the age of 14 to 22. That's one of the few big regrets I have in my life.
That's good. I've never heard that one. Don't be an idiot and smoke. What's something you're doing right now, Nick, that your future self is going to say thank you for?
Yeah, definitely the exercise, and I don't compromise on that. I would say many people will think that I'm addicted to exercise. It's actually not true. I'm addicted to work. I really am a workaholic. I really enjoy my work. I could easily pack my schedule with work, but I discipline myself on sticking in those sort of, at the moment, 3-4 hours a day of exercise every day, which is quite extreme. And many times I swear I need to work more. I have stuff to do. But I'm really disciplined to just leave it and just get out there, go with the flow, meet with people, and go out and exercise. And I think I will never. I think it froze for a second. It's probably my connection. Sorry.
Well, that's good, Nick. I can relate to that loving the work and discipline. I initially signed up for a marathon because I knew that I would need the discipline. Like I needed to get into shape. I needed to move my body. And I knew that a marathon would call for consistent, strict regime on my part. So that was where I started. And yeah, I have found if I don't have an event on the calendar, my fitness motivation is not as strong. Like I'll still do it, but it's not as intense. So I really like having something on the calendar. And it's good for me too to break away from work.
Yeah, fantastic. That's why I keep rolling and signing up for a race 1 year in the future. I know otherwise, if I don't have that race, step by step, I will just keep skipping that exercise and reduce it when maybe I don't exercise. And then it's really hard to start again. So better just keep going, right?
I agree. My next question, what is a favorite book or quote? What is something that has motivated you?
I have read a lot of great books, and I think one for anyone who's listening and perhaps going through a challenging time, I think Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote that book about his experience of surviving Auschwitz, the concentration camp, about your mindset of basically be able to zoom out on a situation when you're going through something hard and almost looking at it like someone who's in a cinema. You're watching at that character down there. And that can be a good tactic, because when life hits us, we can have that capacity to zoom out, and it's easier to go through it and look at instead, what can I learn from this? What can I grow from this? If I'm now looking back at this situation from a year, what are the learnings from this? And that's something that I'm trying to bring with me. And it's something that I work with my coaching clients also on that mindset.
That's a very quoted book. People quote that book all the time. And it was born through adversity and struggle. It's a hard book. And he talks in there about when people don't have that purpose, that meaning, like they didn't make it. It's really what gave him that limitless, purposeful life. All right. My last question for you, Nick, is if this was your final message to the world, maybe something happens this afternoon on your bike ride, what's the signature? What do you want the world to know?
I want everyone to not go to bed tonight if they have any resentments. If that's a friend, a colleague, a wife, or a husband, that we have some pain. Maybe we didn't speak to our father for 3 years because there's been some pain there. I would recommend anyone try to make that amend and swallow your pride. And it's not about the ego, and just clean up your side of the street before you go to bed, and you will have the best sleep ever.
Powerful. Nick, how do people find, follow, and connect with you?
The best is on LinkedIn. My name is spelled Nick Jonsson, NickJonsson. Find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, my webpage is nickjonsson.com.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Marty. Really loved it.
Just wanted to thank you guys for listening to the end. In closing, I just wanted to add that if this message resonates with you, if it aligns with your values, and something in it today triggered something, then you can also look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. We are really trying to help people live more intentional lives, to kill the complacency with which they have subscribed to. I know there's many ways in which I get sucked in all the time. So if this is beneficial, follow me there.